There we go, John. We're live now.
Awesome, awesome.
All right, folks. Welcome to a late day Eat Sleep Code podcast. John and I are here to talk about the industry news for the week. So we should start things off by a quick introduction. Hello and welcome to Eat Sleep Code, the official Telerik podcast. I'm your host, Ed Charbeneau, with my co-host, John Bristowe. How you doing, John?
I'm well, thanks. How's everyone doing out there? Hope everyone's safe and happy and productive and enjoying all the benefits of new technology that's recently hit us. So apparently I have an echo, so there you go.
We've got two streams, audio streams going probably.
All right. The voice is so nice, you had to echo it twice.
There we go. There we go. The NDI stream likes to override the main output, so I think we're good now. Appreciate the chat room chiming in right away to fix that up for us.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome, Binary Chef. Thanks for the tip. So it is a holiday here in the U.S. It's Memorial Day, so hope everybody's having a good Memorial Day if you're here. So probably won't see a whole lot of U.S. viewership today, but that's okay. They can watch a replay tomorrow, have something to listen to while they work, and get back to productivity. How are things going down there in Australia, John?
Things are well. It's obviously getting a little cool down here, obviously, because of the tilt of the Earth. It's becoming our winter. So thanks to that, that's why I'm wearing the jumper here. But things have been going well. We're actually sending our kids back to school. So things are actually starting to open up now. Australia has not suffered as poorly as other countries. And that's by no means as a result of the government's performance or anything. It's just part of it might be, but I think it's also we're just happy to be lucky in our geographic location where we're not getting a lot of cases right now because most of them came from overseas. So hopefully that continues to be the trend, but I guess we'll be one of the first guinea pigs out of the starting blocks here to see how things go.
Yeah, and I'm not a expert on the matter, but I'm sure there's some help in having the fact that you're on an island.
Yeah, that helps.
It's easier to kind of keep the borders closed to certain things than it is
Well,
here
if
in the
history is
States.
any indication, the 1918 flu pandemic actually had a similar start for Australia. So at the beginning, Australia didn't get hit very bad, but then it was the second wave that actually hit Australia quite poorly. So
Okay.
that's something we'll have to keep an eye on. I think all the officials are aware of that, and we'll see how it goes, I guess.
Yeah, we're opening things up here already, which is kind of scary because it's not a like countrywide problem that happens at the exact same time. So it's not like all of the outbreaks are in sync somehow, and everybody's seeing everything spike at the same time. Yet we're treating it like we should be opening everything back up at the same time. And there's other states and cities that are lagging behind, like New York is already kind of over their main peak. And they're like, we're going to start opening up, but the rest of the country's opening up too. In certain places, it's getting worse while they're opening up. It's not, I don't know. Yeah, it is what it is. We've kind of lost control of things, in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. So you should probably get onto some more lighthearted news things that we don't see on TV 24/7. I like to hit these up at least once a show because we're doing a lot of Skype calls and Teams and what have you while everybody is supposed to be home quarantining. So there's a lot more Skype and Teams backgrounds that we can make light of our day with. And I've got a good pile of them here at this article by PocketLint, which I think they tell you a little bit about how to enable them in your meeting as well. But besides that, they put a pretty good list of backgrounds down. There's the good old-fashioned Windows XP.
XP.
Yeah. Of course, why not Minecraft? Who doesn't love Minecraft? The Office.
Yep.
That's kind of lame, but The Simpsons is awesome, right? Gotta have the
Wow.
Simpsons room behind you. There's the
All
Everything
right.
is Fine. I like the Everything is Fine. I have that one myself. Uh, this is a good one. I like this.
Yeah, that's quite
Uh,
good.
Distracted boyfriend meme. That's too awesome. I'm gonna have to try that one out myself. I think people at
All
work
right.
will get a kick out of that. Star Trek fans, don't want to leave you behind. There's the
Hmm.
Bridge of the Enterprise, my favorite Star Wars ship. Uh, Dad jokes. There's literally a Star Wars one
Rebel base.
next.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rebel Base.
The fact that we mentioned Star Wars, oh, sorry, excuse me, Star Trek, I almost committed a huge faux pas there. This is like a very cheap version of the holodeck. Pick pick
Yeah.
your screen here. So
Toy Story. That's a pretty good one if you're, maybe you're Skype calling with kids in the classroom or something. Finding Nemo. I mean, there's a great list of them here. We'll go through each and every one, but you've got like
yeah,
Family
why not?
Guy, the whole 9 yards. It's
Wow.
a good collection of them. We've had some pretty dedicated ones in the past, like Rick and Morty, and what was the other big one? Street Fighter.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's a good list there. That's got
Perfect.
some variety to it. So those are fun. So
Love it.
enjoy those. John, we talked about the pie hole last week.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got a little bit of an update for us?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Pi-hole is this little bit of software that you run on your Raspberry Pi. And effectively, what this does is provides an ability for you to get rid of most, if not all, of your ads that are on your internal network. So uh, this is really nice piece of software. I've been running it for a couple days now. Well, yeah, 3 days, and it's really taken a lot of requests off the network. So the nice thing about this is that it doesn't really do a massive disruption to the day to day. People on your network, meaning my kids and my wife, really don't see much of a difference. But me being the sysops system administrator, network administrator,
Mm-hmm.
I've been keeping track of the stats of how many ads and requests this has been basically negating. And I'm seeing about a 10 to 15% reduction in the number of outbound requests. So this is a little device that sits right next to my router and my access point for my network. And any request that hits a well-known domain name that is maintained by a list of people will go ahead and obviously return a null result. And so what this effectively does is it eliminates all those HTTP round trips that occur, whilst at the same time eliminating ads, which is great. So this is a really nice piece of software. And recently they updated to version 5. The version 5 software is fantastic. Really nice UI, gives you great stats, and has built-in capabilities. If you want, you can use it for a DHCP server. You can use it for obviously for DNS. But there's other capabilities as well built into the Pi-hole software as well. So great piece of software. Pick up a Raspberry Pi. It shouldn't cost you more than a couple $100. Install this on there, and then just put it right in your, server room or whatever you have for the equivalent for your home, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, so I pulled up Telerik Fiddler while you were talking about the pie hole. If you want to see what type of effect that can have on your system, I've got it monitoring my traffic right now. I don't have a
Yep.
pie hole. So
Yep.
you'll probably see as we go through some of these items here, this is just going to be like polluted with like AdSense URLs and all kinds of fun
Sure.
stuff that goes across the wire that you're not really aware of, or maybe you're aware of. You can just, kind of feel like you don't care because you don't have control over it. With the
Right.
pie hole, you do, and you'll be able to see all that stuff clear up. So we'll keep
Yeah, the
that
best
running.
analogy I could have provided to my wife, who's not really technical, is when you think of a web page, the browser itself serves the role of like the master chef within a kitchen. So you've seen, Gordon Ramsay, and he gets the list of orders, and he's like 2 steak, 2 lamb, 2 whatever, and then everyone replies yes, chef. So your browser is basically doing the same thing. The list of items that it has is not food, but rather HTTP requests. So the requests are basically resources like I need 5 images, I need 4 JavaScript files, I need this many CSS, and then I need these ads, which have been basically embedded within the context of this web page. And so effectively what happens is Gordon or your browser calls out for these, and the Pi-hole says, yeah, that's great, and then returns nothing, basically.
So it's a great little utility if you want to tinker with a Raspberry Pi. So just getting one of those, and
one of many utilities.
Yeah, one of many. Great for kids too. If you want to block stuff that's not supposed to be on your network, you can do that as well. Which I don't have one of these, but I got blamed for blocking Snapchat in the house, and it turned out to be Snapchat's fault, not mine. The kids were like, "You blocked Snapchat, didn't you?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't block Snapchat. Like you can put the pitchforks down, kids." So it's really weird. It turns out like there must have been a software update or something they did that broke some of the cached settings, and you had to go in and like toggle notifications on and off, and it just like fixed it. So they broke the registry or something that's in there. Anyhow, I got blamed for it. They thought I was pulling some Pi-hole type shenanigans with them. And they're like, "Dad, go fix it." This is an interesting turn of events for me because I just got one of these fancy devices. So the Oculus Quest. We just got some Oculus Quests on our DevRel team here, and we're going to try some VR stuff pretty soon. We'll make some more announcements when we have some concrete plans to do with these. But in the meantime, we've been getting acquainted with them and doing some, for lack of a better term, training. We'll call it training.
Yeah, sure.
Playing with things is training, right? We're trying to figure out how to use them and take advantage of them. And with everybody being home, how can we have virtual events with these VR accessories and things, and maybe make our events a little more interesting. So we're doing some R&D basically, and a couple of us have these, and it's the Oculus Quests or the Oculus Quest and Rift S and 1 year anniversary. So they just shipped a brand new firmware with hand tracking. If you've ever used the HoloLens, then you'll understand what hand tracking is. So you can basically
I hate those gestures. I could never figure them out. I'm just like, what am I supposed to do?
So
there's gang signs. I don't know what I'm doing.
Throwing gang signs. That's great. Well, you're in Australia, so isn't it like,
sure,
this is a knife? No, this is a knife.
Yeah, I know exactly. Like, is there a localized version of those? I don't know.
There's probably maybe like one person of a certain age that understands that joke probably by now, but yeah. So they have full hand tracking now, and in the Oculus, I think there's only one gesture. It depends on the game, maybe, but for the OS, there's just one menu gesture, which took me a little bit to figure out. Like you said, they can be tricky. It had a better interaction for like clicking than the HoloLens does, in my opinion.
Yeah, the HoloLens has a bloom gesture, I think.
Yeah.
Whatever that's called.
Yeah, there's that one. This has something similar where you kind of like grab at your face and it makes the menu come up. And then there's like the click gesture where you kind of like pinch the air. It works really well, except these glasses work on a infrared spectrum. I'm not sure what the HoloLens uses. I know it has the camera. I believe it's IR as well, but there's something with my lights in here. They're on a what do you call it? I'm trying to think of the electrical term. It's a dimmer switch.
Frequency?
It's a dimmer. There's two different kinds of dimmers. The one that they use for lighting is, I can't remember the name of it now. But it basically changes. It can change the frequency kind of your lighting.
Yeah, you have to remember it's taking screen grabs effectively any number of times per second, which is your hertz. And so it's taking a capture of this to determine what gesture, if any, you're making. And if your lighting is also on a frequency, that can affect how much light is coming in. If you've ever done a slow-mo or super slow-mo video, you can see the effect of light right there. How if you have certain types of lights, they'll radiate at different frequencies, essentially, unless you have a constant source like one of these old wire, classic sort of resistor wire light bulbs. Most people have LEDs these days, so
Yeah.
that's a bit different.
I think I was looking for Triac is the type of system it is. But they're not, like you said, they're not like reducing the resistance of the load across the wire. They're actually like shunting it. So what happens is it changes the kind of the frequency in which the bulbs are flashing, which is driving the IR absolutely mad. So
Yes, it would.
it's essentially strobing an IR signal, and when you go to pinch, it clicks like a bazillion times. So, to this thing, it's just like clicking like mad. So if you hold your fingers together, it's like clicking just a million times over. So I've been like kind of toying around with my lights. I have to jack them all the way up so it's not limiting that circuit at all for it to work. But other than that, the hand tracking works amazingly well. So it's all like just added through firmware. So you don't have to go get a new set of glasses now that they're a year old. They just firmware patched in like a whole additional feature. Another thing that they released is like a whole new menu system, and there's all kinds of cool stuff. So after a year, it's a pretty solid looking device, and looks like there's a few people in the chat room that were looking into these as well. So
How much do these cost?
the system itself, if you want the controllers, which I suggest you have, you're not going to be able to do much without them. I think it's $700 US for the glasses and the controllers together. They're kind of hard to find right now, so you might see that price fluctuate depending on the availability of them. But you're also going to want to set aside a little bit of money for some accessories. I went out and bought a stand to hold it when I'm not using it, and also some extra padding for the headset. It's a little heavy on the face, so I bought some cushions and stuff that go behind it that kind of make it a little bit more easy on the head. And also some rechargeable batteries for the controllers, because those burn quick, man. I think at about 5 hours, the batteries are already at like half capacity. So it really burns through some AA's fast. So I bought some rechargeables for it, and some other little accessories that I thought I'd like. So it's going to set you back a bit, as much as maybe one of the top level consoles like the Xbox or the PlayStation would. So expect it to be a little bit of an investment. I will say, if you have a high-powered PC, the Oculus Quest is amazing. The Rift S was supposed to be like the PC counterpart. The Quest is a standalone, so you can use it without any computer at all, which is nice. So there's a whole library of Android-based games that are on it, and they're really good quality. They're not quite... I mean, you could think of them as maybe a Nintendo Switch quality game, which isn't bad at all. If you have a PC, however, you might want to play something like this. I'll pull up our next link. This is what I'm trying out with the Quest, is Half-Life Alyx. And this is a PC-based game. So I've got an NVIDIA 2080 Ti based system. And what's really nice about the Quest is you can hook to your PC through a 5 gigahertz network and play wirelessly. Now, if you went with the Oculus S, you have to have a cable attached to your PC to do that, and you have to have a PC. You can't play the standalone games that are available on the Quest, and the two systems are the same price. So the Quest is actually a no-brainer, because it's more it's more featureful. You have to have a really good internal network in your home.
Right.
Fortunately, I've worked from home for quite a while, so I invested in some really good gear, and
Yep.
I have an Ethernet jack on the PC that goes straight to the router, and then the router's got 5 gigahertz, and it's in the room with me. So I'm hitting 90 something percent bandwidth on that thing connected to the headset. I can play this game with ultra settings, and it doesn't lag,
Nice.
and it is phenomenal. It's quite the experience. So this is like the next big thing in gaming.
Cool.
If you haven't
I like it.
tried Half-Life Alyx or watched videos on it, I suggest check it out because it is very cool.
I
Um,
haven't played Half-Life in a while, but I do remember the crowbar. Does this come with a virtual, or I guess a foam crowbar for you to use in the VR version?
so that would be great. So what's kind of funny about this, since we're talking like specifically on Half-Life here, if you're a Half-Life fan, you know how important the crowbar is to the Half-Life universe. There's actually no melee weapons at all in this, which is
Oh,
really odd because melee weapons are possible in other games on the Rift. So I don't know why they chose not to do it for Half-Life Alyx. And there's a couple things that are actually kind of clunky with um, the physics in the game. For example, everything kind of feels the same weight, which is kind of odd when you're in VR. So I'll give you an example. If you pick up an empty soda can, it feels the same weight. And I'm not saying like heavy, like the controller should be heavier, but if I throw that soda can, I can throw it, maybe 20 yards or something. I could pick up a 200-pound jackhammer and throw it about the same distance. So they
yeah. It's
don't
almost like when you pick.
feel.
It's almost like when you, like Seinfeld used to say. It's when you go to reach for a half or an empty milk carton and you pick it up and it's way too light. You go to reach for it and it's like, oh, it's too light. Oh no, I ran out.
Exactly. So yeah, that part of the game was kind of the only thing that was really disappointing, and it's a very trivial thing in the grand scheme of things. What's really cool though is if you are a gamer or Half-Life player, especially, what you don't realize, even if you watch the videos on YouTube, you're not going to get the idea of what's actually happening behind the glasses, and that is like when you see these characters on screen, they're like little green army men on your screen, right? They're
Hmm.
characters on your monitor. Um, when you put the glasses on, they're as big as you are. So you like walk up to these figures and they're like life size. It's a whole different experience putting it on in VR than it
Creepy.
is watching it on a screen. So it's
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing. It definitely tricks your senses a bit. We were having some fun the other night. My daughter was laughing at me because in the game I'm walking around this really dark room, and I walk up to a door, and I'm getting ready to like reach for the doorknob and like push the door open. And it
Hmm.
just so happened that in the real world space, I was also next to a door, and she was coming through, and it was locked, and she was like jiggling the doorknob, and I'm reaching for a door handle, and I hear a doorknob jiggling, and I stop, and I'm like, all right, something's gonna come, something's
Yeah.
coming through for me. So I'm like backing away, and then I hear it again, and I'm like, wait a minute. I lift the glasses up, and I can see through the window. My daughter's like, hey, let me in. So we've had some fun. They've been picking on Dad. She scared
Awesome.
me. So it's really something else. If you are able to get a hold of it somehow, maybe you know a friend that has it, and you're able to get together, definitely need to check that thing out. It
Sweet.
is amazing. So the Quest, very cool. New software update. If you have one, check it out. If you're able to connect to a PC, Half-Life Alyx is amazing. Speaking of gaming,
Yes.
this is a pretty popular video right
Yes.
now. This is the Unreal Engine 5. Did you see this, John?
I did. I read a little bit about it actually. I have a bit of a history with looking at these game engines, just as a sort of interested sort of bystander, and I know that uh, Unreal has produced these wonderful demos in the past, and I hope this isn't just another instance of that occurring, because it looks pretty amazing.
Yeah, the amount of triangles they say this thing can push is pretty unbelievable. The lighting looks phenomenal in it. That was one of the major kind of debates that we had in the past generation of game engines. Since we were talking about Half-Life earlier, the lighting in Half-Life is very realistic. There used to be a joke meme that went around where they had like all of the different lighting from all the game engines, and there
Right,
was like Half-Life, and it looked like a real photo. And then
right.
there was Far Cry, and everything was like super oversaturated. And then like they had the other engines in there. This looks very realistic to me. It looks
Yeah,
like the lighting is spot on. The shadowing, it's probably doing ray tracing and stuff. It looks phenomenal.
yeah. The chances of this being legit, and I say this because if you read into the history of Unreal, they do produce these fantastic trailers of
Hmm.
their next gen technology, and then when push comes to shove, sometimes the technology doesn't always deliver. The reason why I'm feeling a little bit more optimistic about this is because Epic has been working, as you know, with the Star Wars franchise on the Mandalorian series. Well, they did, um, and they leveraged a lot of really interesting technology for that. Did you know that all the sets that they have for the Mandalorian are all virtual, and they use this 360 surrounding view powered by Epic and other technologies for the scenes themselves, so they don't have to actually pick up and go somewhere. But the scenes look amazing. I mean, The Mandalorian. I don't know if you've seen it, but the scenes on it are fantastic. And so I have some optimism that this next version of Unreal will be quite good. The real question is whether or not the systems that are coming out, the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X, whether or not they're going to have the power to support it. I know that people are already starting to do shootouts against them without even any hardware to look at, but people are looking at the specs of both and determining which one will be the winner. We'll see.
Yeah, so the engine looks pretty impressive. Like you said, that the demos always exceed what the actual reality seems to be. What's nice here is there's been a couple articles following up on this, and
Mm.
they've gotten some confirmation that you're able to run this on a high-end Intel processor with a NVIDIA 2070
Oh, of
system.
course. Yeah, you can run anything on
So,
that. Come on.
so I mean that's like one notch down from the high end. So it's like ultra mid range
Yeah.
graphics CPU. So it's what is that, about $300 or so.
Mm.
Um, so if it looks that good at that level, you can expect the Xbox X and the PlayStation 5 to be at about that range,
Right.
which seems about right. Like every time we've had one of these um, console releases, they've been pretty close to what the latest gen gaming PC has been capable of, which makes them a pretty good investment because usually they're selling these things for a slight loss,
Yep.
and try to make up for it in the long term. So you
Yep.
can get a
That's always the
pretty
case.
beefy console that matches, like a $3,000 desktop machine, and play with these amazing games in like 4K and everything. So those are pretty cool. And while we're on the subject of Unreal, since we're on Twitch here, I put this in the chat room as well. If you're interested in game engines, check out the Unreal Engine Twitch channel. This is a really cool channel because it's not about gaming so much as it is the engine and the science behind it. And they've had a really good this educator live stream series. They had their what was it, the name of his role, chief mathematician or something like that. And he's talking about like the mathematics behind the game engine and how they do um, the keyframe animations and edge detection and all kinds of craziness. They've got a lot of the Fortnite devs come on and talk about stuff. It's a really cool channel. if you're into computer science stuff.
Yeah, I'll have to
So
check that out. That's awesome.
yeah, it's really neat. We'll continue with our gaming conversation, John. The Xbox Series X webpage launched finally.
Yes.
So this is brand new.
Yes. So the Xbox Series X is the next version of the Xbox. This thing looks like a glorified toaster. They've in the history of product hardware launches. Microsoft has gone and emulated or copied Apple in its disassembly version of the unit itself. Looks pretty impressive. The specs for this are actually quite good. They are leveraging some interesting hardware designs for this, and again, the shootouts have begun. Whether or not this one will beat out the PlayStation 5 or, etc. I think on the hardware side, I think the Xbox Series X has an edge over the PlayStation 5. I do know that their controllers are actually quite good. The controller itself is quite expensive. That new controller is about $300 Aussie, which is insane for a controller. This thing looks pretty powerful.
Yeah, if you look at the overall design of this thing, it reminds me a lot of the Mac trash can.
Cube? Yeah, the Cube.
But it's square instead. Do you remember, what was that? Like Darth Vader's trash can, people were calling it. It was one of the Mac, high-end Mac Pros, like a couple years ago.
The Mac Pro was a garbage disposal, a black garbage disposal that looked very similar to this. And then before that, there was the Cube, which was a very translucent-y sort of, classic Simpsons. Don't ask what you can do for, don't ask what it can do for you. Ask what you can do for it. Type homage. This thing is looking pretty sweet, though. I think certainly looks-wise, this one definitely stands out.
And you can kind of get a sense of scale for it in this one tiny little postage stamp picture here. It's about as wide as a controller.
Right.
And it's about maybe 3 or 4 controllers tall. So now it's really not that big.
I'm just going to say something about this. This is interesting. So what's really interesting about this decision here is the fact that this will have to stand out on a bookshelf. So if you think about it just from an optics perspective, right? What do you see when you buy TV furniture? You typically see the PS4 or the Xbox sitting in a very horizontal oriented shelf on your furniture. And so what this is going to do is it's going to force people to put this either beside the TV or in the bookshelf in a prominent position. So in a very sort of sneaky sort of way, I think the designers use this design. Not only they'll say it was for cooling. I think it's more for the fact that they can be on IKEA bookshelf photos in a more prominent position than the PlayStation.
Yeah, coming from a hardware background, I find this pretty interesting. So they're bragging here, highlighting the quote split motherboard for the first time ever on a console. A groundbreaking split motherboard to keep your internals cool, so they can blast air up the middle of these two pieces of hardware. What's not great about this design is the fact that they've increased the distance of the signal across this cavity here.
Might be negligible.
Yeah, we'll have to see if there's any effect on this thing. So it is attaching.
It might affect the durability. I'm going to put my engineering hat on here. I don't think the signal will be too affected by this. It may affect the system durability from a hardware perspective, right? If you've got that is a point of stress, right there, I would imagine. You know how notorious these game consoles are for breaking. So I would imagine this might be harder to fix, this console.
Yeah. Well, at high frequencies, these wires can become a real issue.
Sure.
And even if it's a flex cable that's only like an inch or two long, it can be a problem. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. But it's funny that is one of the things that they're kind of bragging about.
It makes sense. I mean, they're increasing the surface area. So for sure, they're going to provide better cooling by doing this.
Yeah. we'll see. And oh, of course, they're getting good with the Mac style
Yeah,
advertising, which is a compliment. Yeah, I'm not bashing it, but the quote
we've
vapor chamber.
reimagined it. Yeah.
Like, how else do you market an empty space but call it a quote vapor chamber?
Well, at least they didn't go to the Apple extreme of calling a magic vapor chamber.
Yeah, the magical vapor chamber.
It's just like
That
sometimes you want to just tell Apple, shut up. Like it's just a mouse. It's not a magic mouse. It's a mouse. All right.
it's not a high
Oh,
definition display. It's Retina.
yeah, I know. Get out of here.
It's not USB-C. It's Lightning.
Well,
But
we'll see how this thing. We'll see how this thing goes.
yeah, the one last thing I'll point out here too is the little drive bay is pretty slick. 1 terabyte
Yes.
drive, and it's probably the size of a thumb drive. You might say
Yeah.
it's just like a little square cart that you can jam into the back and get another terabyte of memory on your
Well, those
console.
SSDs are so small. They're like
Oh
this
my
big,
gosh,
really.
they're
So
so small
yeah,
these days.
yeah.
So insane. Let's talk about some real stuff that developers use to make real money so we can pay for our
All right, here
fancy
we go.
toys. Maui,
Yes.
multi-platform application UI.
Yes, yes. So this is announcement that came out of Build, the online virtual summit now, that was last week. And what they've introduced here is finally a unification. Well, I guess Xamarin was doing this, but finally a unification amongst all the very disparate UI technologies that exist. People have been screaming for this for years. Certainly when WPF was announced, people were wondering, why are you doing this sort of offshoot of XAML and other things, and you're leaving everyone on the Win forms and MFC, etc., behind. So, as it says rightly here, this is an evolution of Xamarin Forms. Xamarin Forms basically allows you to do exactly this. It is obviously a little going to be a little bit different, I would assume. I think the proof is going to be in the pudding, but finally, we're going to have a multi-platform app UI technology for .NET developers.
This will definitely be interesting to see. It is a long way off.
Yes.
So it is alluded to here on this graphic that I have up. And if you're not really reading and comprehending everything in great detail, you may overlook this. But it says targeting .NET 6 previews by the end of the year. So that means it's not going to be a shipping and supported technology for another 2 years.
Is that when .NET 6 is being planned? 2 years?
Yes, because .NET 5 won't be out until fall of this year.
Mm-hmm.
So the previews are going to ship this year for .NET 6. So we're going to be in preview, it looks like, until 2021. And then I would say fall of 2021 is when we'll see .NET 6 shipping. So, that gives us plenty of time, though, to start tinkering with this stuff and then seeing how we can migrate to it and get all of our ducks in a row before we, set up real development on it. But, just manage your expectations. If you read this as it's written, targeting .NET 6 previews by the end of the year does not mean that it's going to be production ready by the end of the year. It means you're getting the beta by the end of the year. And that makes a lot of sense because, this is a huge thing to undertake, right?
Yep. Yeah, Microsoft does this every 10 years or so. Using an analogy, Microsoft will flood the developer ecosystem with a technology and it will wash away the sins of all past. And so they've developed an arc here, which is the Xamarin Forms technology. So if you're looking at getting up to speed on what this will encompass from a implementation perspective and getting your feet beneath you and booking your ticket on the arc, so to speak, that Microsoft's going to be making through this, I would start dabbling with Xamarin Forms. Xamarin Forms is a great technology, works well, integrates with a variety of control vendors such as Telerik, and we're big fans of it. I think that Maui certainly is setting very high expectations. I think that the most important thing for me is the developer productivity around this. I think that's going to be the thing that, for me, is going to really win developers over. Because the reality is, with Xamarin Forms initially, was, if you skated in the middle of the pond, you were fine. But as soon as you got to the edges, things looked very different. And so my hope is that these guys can certainly get around some of those issues going forward. I think that they probably are well aware of the issues, which is why it's basically requiring a little bit of a change. Screenshots like this are great. Certainly they live well in the demo world, but the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah. So it's actually come a long way already, which is pretty impressive. So I actually heard about this at the MVP Summit in March, and it was NDA. At that time, there was no visuals. It was all just paper napkin, as far as I know. This is something that we're thinking of, and we're coming up with the design concepts for it, and then build. Here we have screenshots of Visual Studio with, I don't know if this is a mock-up or if they showed. I missed a lot of build. I was working through it, so I don't know if they showed an actual demo of this running. I think they did. I want to say I listened to some of it. I didn't get to see it, unfortunately. But I think they did have some Maui apps that they did run. And this is a nice looking developer experience so far. We have our platforms node, and we're able to run different code for different platforms if we need to. So we can kind of share a common code base unless there's something that is platform specific. We have overrides. This is all common stuff that they've done with Xamarin before, and they're applying it to a larger role. Some comments in the chat room about it not doing web. It doesn't do web right now. There is the ability to use the Blazor framework, though, to build iOS and Android and Windows applications through Maui. So it'll utilize the Blazor syntax, but it will be in a Xamarin-like experience. So it's not writing HTML. It'll be doing XML with Blazor, or Razor syntax, rather. So there's the Blazor approach there. There's also some rumors that there may be a web component to this. We'll have to see how that develops. I don't have anything concrete that I can give you on that, but I know that's something that's being explored. Is they're looking into ways to make that extend even further onto the web platform. So how those controls will get translated and what the markup will look like, I can't tell you, but I know there's research being done into making that more broad range. Blazor and WebAssembly enables a lot of cool stuff, so we'll see what happens in the future. I mean, we're talking 2 years out, so a lot can change by then.
Yep. I think Microsoft has always struggled with this paradigm, the one UI framework to rule them all, and I wish them the best of luck. It's a hard problem. I think that's part of the reason why they're not tackling web, is because web is hard. But I think that this is something that a lot of people want. I think that a lot of people need. Well, I guess we'll see. I got a little confused, to be honest, when I first heard this, because I know that Microsoft has a long history of Hawaii-related code names, and so I was like, is this a rehash of some of the stuff? I think that Hawaii was reserved as a bunch of products or projects for mobile-oriented products. But Maui, I guess, is the new hotness, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. One thing that's kind of cool is it does MVVM, and then this new React-like MVU. They say Elm. They keep saying Elm here, but this is very React to me. We're using a lot of like Lambda expressions to just throw around UI information. So there's that. It's very expressive.
As long as it doesn't spit out divs, I'm happy.
Well, it's XML, so it doesn't even. You don't even see the XML portion of it it's a coded UI, which may be why they're saying L more than React, because React you're still wrapping HTML elements within it. So this actually, you new up an object and then add elements to it. The markup is C# only and no other markup language.
I think what people would like here is a really nice serialization format. That's why I think XML you gravitate to, but I could easily see people utilizing other formats for this. Conversions would be nice as well. But I think ultimately the best way to represent this is through code.
Yeah, look at that pipeline in the screenshot. So we've got, adding a new label, and then every property pipes out beneath it, color, alignment, margin.
This fluid UI style. It's very, very similar to what we've done with Razor and other technologies in the past.
Yeah, reminds me a lot of the HTML helper right there.
Yep.
Yeah. Very similar stuff.
I like it. I have no problem with this. I think that people will gravitate to whatever they feel is going to work for them. But
and then finally, it's mentioned here, which is really strange because the amount of momentum that's behind Blazor, it just gets a name drop in here and no example. But Blazor's the other syntax that you can use to program Maui. It's just barely highlighted in here, which is strange, but it follows the XML type of a format, similar to the MVVM here.
I think it's a challenge because the paradigms are different, right? With web, they constructed a whole new way of interacting with UI controls that some UI controls don't make sense in a web context, right? And we've seen this. This is like why Telerik is successful at bridging that gap. There are certain controls that don't lend themselves well to a web interface. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's probably why there's a bit of a hesitation there. I'm guessing. I'm totally speculating. I have no information to say otherwise. But I know that when you try and map between those two worlds, things deteriorate from a user perspective, a user experience perspective.
Yeah. Mobile is actually still very clunky on web. Even with responsive and adaptive components, it's still not as good as the native feel. That's why, and we get this question a lot, and we had it in our last Telerik webinar. Somebody said, why would I choose, Telerik UI for Xamarin when I can just write, Blazor or MVC? And it's like, well, the pickers and, just look at the components we're releasing in this webinar. They're all pickers. And, you pick maybe like dates or colors or whatever.
Right.
That's a very tight interaction between your thumb generally and the screen. And when you're rendering those on a native on-screen UI, it's much more smooth and easier to navigate with your thumb than it is some HTML that you've adapted to try to run in that same space. You can mimic those things down to the pixel and they still don't feel the same. So there's definitely some benefits to having a native app. What I really like, I think, is the holy grail of app development is when you have something like this with Maui and you can multi-target the different platforms, and then when you need something very specific, you can have a responsive application for the web that also runs on all of these, but then you have companion apps that also targets these things very directly. So you start your users off with your mobile responsive site, and then they have the option to download the Android or iOS or desktop
just compiler
app.
magic, basically. It's not. We've done this actually for a long time. This ability to target specific platforms at compile time.
Yeah, but the holy grail to me isn't one or the other; it's both. Right? You have your responsive mobile web app, but you also have a very dedicated, app for those that want to install it and maybe have a little more seamless experience, or maybe there's some features that you can only do on mobile, and the web always lags behind just a little bit on the API level. So maybe there's thumbprint identification and all that stuff that you can enable that only the device has. So
right.
It's it's not a versus issue with me. It's a give me all of
It's
them.
interesting stuff. It's interesting stuff to say the least.
So welcome to C Sharp 9.0. See, you get it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. C Sharp 9.
Yes.
So it was interesting. I was having a conversation with my boss. You know her, Sarah. Sarah Fatz is. She was asking me about this. She said, "What do you think of C Sharp 9?" And again, I missed like all of build because of our release webinar, and I was like, "Yeah, you know what? I should probably go read about this for a minute before I answer that."
Yeah.
So
Yep.
she popped me over the article, and I looked at it, and I was like, "This is just functional programming, Sarah. That's what I think about it."
Yep. Yep.
It's
Certainly a lot of that. Look, our history is rife with leveraging ideas. And as Steve Jobs said, great artists steal. I'm not implying that, but it certainly is a lot of goodness from that heritage in C Sharp 9 by the looks of things.
Well, the way I've been looking at this, I've been looking at this for a while. We're 2020 now. I want to say for the last 5 to 7 years. It's got to be more like 7. I've been investing time into learning about functional programming, and I'm not a functional programming person. Like, I'm not writing any professionally, but I've done a lot of research on it because that's the way I thought the trend was going to go with programming in general, just because of my background with hardware. We saw the race for, the gigahertz race kind of peter out, and we've gotten to the point where we're like, okay, we can only get so much frequency through the processor. We've got to scale outward now and do parallel processing. And the OOP, or object-oriented programming languages that we have or had, weren't great at parallel processing. And you run into things like race conditions and threading, multi-threading issues with mutability and all that stuff. So I started investing time into learning about functional programming quite a while ago because I saw the writing on the wall. I was like, this is going to be the next skill set that you're going to have if you're going to be a developer in the future. And I think that's the same thing that's happening with the language. It's not only pressure from the fact that we need to target multi-threading hardware, but the overall industry has seen that same trend. Other languages have added functional programming capabilities. Functional programming languages have picked up momentum as well. So you see those things starting to just blur into C# overall. The first time we saw this was in C# 3.0, actually. So it's been in there a little while. That was when Link hit. So the Link framework dropped in 3.0. It's hard to believe it's been that long, right?
Yeah, crazy.
I mean, do you remember when 3.0 hit? Like, what were you doing?
It's burned in my brain. Yeah, I remember it very well.
Yeah, so, changed so many roles and careers since then. And here we are with C# 9, 6 iterations later, and we're hitting another huge set of functional programming features. So if you want to get into the details of why I feel this is functional, let's look at what we're doing here. We got init-only properties. So that means what? Read-only to you?
No, it means basically init.
Well, it's a read-only object.
Yes, so it's basically the first time you initialize an object, you want to set the properties on initialization. So that gives you that option now. So we're adding the init keyword or accessor, if you will, for properties.
Yeah, so what we do before this is we would have a class with a initializer or a constructor where you'd bring in the arguments that you want to set properties for. Once those are set, you can never set them again. So it's now an immutable object. This does it through some syntactic sugar, And instead of having get set, you have get init, and then you have to initialize some of the properties when you start the object up. So when you create it, you tell it it's going to have these values, and they're not going to change ever.
Yep. So it provides better terseness.
Yeah, they should never change. So let me think through this here. Okay, there still may be some way to mutate them internally, but I don't think that is the intention behind this. So there's probably space to shoot yourself in the foot with this, but these should be private read-only properties here. So this also enables records. So there's a data, what do you call that? A data keyword. So now you have a data keyword that you can apply that it's telling you that by convention this is going to be immutable. So you say public data class of foo. That thing is now concrete, and you can only set properties on it. You'll never be able to set them again. So all this stuff so far, what type of programming does that line up with? Functional programming, right?
Yep.
With expressions is about working with immutable data. Again, functional programming. So this is creating a way to represent. This is actually a lot like pattern matching, where we're able to kind of filter through certain records and things like that. There's some equality that's been wrapped around that. Data members, again, it's all just extending the same concepts over and over here. Positional records, it's more of the same, more of the same. So mutability is like the entire story to C#9. And mutability is all functional programming. So really interesting. I'm looking forward to it. I like the idea. I think the code is easier to read and write. You can manage expectations around it, test it easier. It's all welcome changes for me.
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter. Some people were welcoming the top-level program capability at the compiler level. So being able just to start writing statements without having to do a main method. People are looking forward to that. But yeah, certainly terseness and the immutability is the word here in C#9. And I welcome it. The challenge I'm always cognizant of is making the language a write-only language. You want to make sure that you're very careful about the sort of syntactic sugar you're putting in so that you can still read the thing when people start getting their hands on it. Because I've come across pieces of code where in C, you have no idea what's going on because they're using very quirky sort of language features that are very hard to navigate. So you have to kind of deconstruct in your head what the heck's going on. So I am optimistic that they'll find a reasonable balance here, just like everything. They'll be cognizant of the fact that not everyone here is going to be a functional programmer. You may see some things here that might confuse you, but by and large, I think people will get used to this.
Yeah, I think what you're cautioning against is it turning into Lisp. Is that the one that like you
with
look
all
at
the brackets?
it? Yeah, so you look at it
start, and
it looks like a regex. Like you're like, what is going on? What is this thing?
Yeah. Lisp and Scheme, you tend to wipe out your parentheses keys as languages. I did a lot of Scheme development back in uni, and I think they were good. But I think C#, it's time that they start adding some further capabilities like this to help out with some of the cases that people have wanted. I think this negates some of the frameworks that have been written in the past to provide these sort of capabilities. But it's all good here.
And I'm not a Lisp programmer, so please don't write me hate mail if I haven't. Oops, I don't know what I just hit there. If I'm not putting this in the proper light, there's probably good ways and bad ways to write
Lisp,
right. Just like with any other language.
Yeah.
But there's some examples I've seen where, I mean, this one even isn't that bad.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some that are like, we can make this whole program, Conway's Game of Life in like one line, and it's like 25 characters just mashed together with parentheses that you can't decipher, and you're like, oh, okay, like here's one, I think. Yeah. Like, all right, sure, that's a
It's not too
thing.
bad. I mean, they still have the same kind of constructs. The key here is that everything is essentially on its own a function, and then the it, it just uses a lot of parentheses basically.
Yeah. Like I was saying, there you can write good C# code and bad C# code. I'm sure there's good Lisp code and just downright awful Lisp code. And
There's Lisp code and there isn't.
yeah, I know don't have to make all of your variables just A, B, C, and F. So I'm sure you can actually name things if you really want to.
Well, they use the concept of let for declaring variables, which is a very mathematical sort of oriented view of the world. Same idea, but scope delimiters are through parentheses. Everything's a function. It's not too hard.
Alrighty, finally we'll wrap this up with a little ESLint
Yes.
7.0 came out.
Yeah, so ESLint's a great tool. Really, really useful for catching all those, I guess, sometimes edge cases in your JavaScript code or ECMAScript code, depending on how you define it. So ESLint should be a tool in your toolbox, gets installed with a variety of other frameworks. It's a great little tool to run as part of your compilation step. And ES7 was released, I think, 2 weeks ago. And adds a number of great capabilities. Really not much to mention other than the fact that just more rules, more goodness, etc., etc.
Yeah, this is good stuff, especially if you're doing node development,
Yeah.
full stacks, JavaScript. It's an essential because you don't have the compiler and Roslyn like you do with C#. So you need a little something in there for your JavaScripts to kind of keep you in line.
Linting is always a great little thing to do. Even if you feel like you know what you're doing, just sometimes some of the rules are a bit esoteric, but I think that ESLint does a good job of managing it. Certainly, with the default settings are reasonable. There are rule files that you can find online that make it a little bit more meaningful for people. But some of them are kind of weird. But by and large, they try and protect you from shooting your foot off.
Yeah, they keep you from chaining ternary operators infinitely, which that one I may be in a little disagreement over. I got a little ham-handed with the tenaries one day, and ESLint was like, "Don't do that. That's just you're not being nice to other people."
Right.
But what's cool is if you chain like the entire statement together, like if whatever is equal to, and then there's like some mathematical garbage is true, and then like you put like a huge function in there, and then you have like another return result that has a huge function in it, and so on. You chain those together, it yells at you. But if you put those in functions that are nice and tightly named that do something, it won't yell at you. So if you just be a good steward, you won't get ESLint mad at you.
Well, like I've said
it's very helpful.
Writing compilers is probably one of the hardest problems to solve, and I have nothing but respect for those folks. So if they complain, I will do whatever they ask me to do in terms of my code.
And a lot of these things help with like code styling for teams. So maybe your team is comfortable at unpacking nested ternary operators, but if they're if you've got a lot of what do you call it, like junior level devs on the team, and you're trying to make sure everything is at a level that everyone is performant and stuff, then turning like all the ESLint features on and making it very strict might help everybody on the team get on board with one style of programming. So it's very useful.
ESLint provides that as, and they're not the only tool. TypeScript provides a set of rules in its compiler that you can turn on, like null checks, for example, In fact, we've actually been playing with that ourselves at Octopus Deploy, and we're finding that it's catching a lot of potential errors in our code. So, unfortunately, when you turn some of these things on, your scroll bar goes from this to this. It goes very small because of the amount of errors that it generates. So you got to use it with a little bit of caution. But by and large, tools like this, if you start off certainly with a project, you can start to capture some interesting behavior in terms of things that you didn't expect. My advice is that go module by module or file by file if you can. Try not to boil the ocean.
Yeah, you don't want to light too many features up at once where you can't compile anything ever again. You got to kind of light them up and fix them, and commit some different branches as you go along till you refactor everything out. So hopefully you have some version of ESLint already.
Yes.
And you're not just going from nothing to turning it on. That's when you really run into problems. Is when you're like just Wild Westing it. You're writing in Notepad or something, and you've got all this legacy code to port over. And you turn ESLint on, and you're like, you're in a sea of red. It's just a big disaster. But yeah, something I suggest also turning on if it's not already turned on. And just one more checkup on the traffic that I've been collecting for the show here. And this,
there you go.
This is like your pie hole will cut down on a lot of this, especially when it says something.google.com in the middle. Not that everything is bad. Some of this stuff is useful, even if it's not immediately obvious to you. I'm one of those people that is like, please collect some Google Analytics on me so I don't have to see ads about garbage that I'm never going to have any kind of interest in. I'd rather see some kind of tailored advertising rather than just, general public advertising. That don't advertise your sports ball stuff to me, please. I'm not interested in your sports ball scores or articles. So please collect some history on me and learn that is not something I do.
I just give them misdirection. I'm all over the road. I give them breadcrumb trails to various things that have nothing to do with me, really. So yeah. I'm a concrete worker in Uruguay. Tomorrow I'm a baseball player, a famous baseball player from New York. I'm misdirecting, leading them all over the road.
So I'll leave you with a little practical joke that you can play on some folks if you want to have fun. Go to Amazon.com in a private browsing tab and find a bunch of products that correlate to one another on something that your intended target would not enjoy. Maybe they are all romantic novels, for example. Get like 5, 6, 10 romantic novels queued up in your private browser, and then send those in an email or text for your friend to open. And they're going to open all these links, and they're going to be like, what the heck did you send me all this randomness for? And then the next day, they will figure out that you've just retrained their algorithm.
Google. Yeah, you train Google because it's reading your Gmail or something like that, and it's like, hey, you might be interested in this.
Yes, it's a lot of fun. It does work. I may
it's like ad hijacking. Profile.
Yeah, my buddy didn't like it when I did it to him, but I thought it was funny. He got some interesting suggestions for the week anyway.
Perfect.
So we'll leave you with that. Everybody have a good week, and we will catch you soon. We got thanks. Is it Naomi? I don't know how to pronounce Twitch names. I'm bad at this, but we've got the Code It live icons now.
Oh, nice.
Or emojis in the chat room. So that's awesome. So thank you. Thanks for tuning in. And you can catch us next week about the same time, maybe a little earlier. We got off to a late start. We're tinkering around with some technical difficulties. But enjoy the rest of your holiday if you're in the U.S. Otherwise, just enjoy the rest of your day or week or night. And we'll see you soon.
Stay safe, guys.